Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on charge payoff process and the credit card feed. And Shay Simpson is going to be going over some best practices. And also, she's going to cover the R2 new release in Sage Intacct and go over that with you today. My name is Sarah Novak. I'm the marketing manager at LBMC Technology Solutions. And just want to go over some quick housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is muted. And if you have any kind of difficulty, please let me know using the chat panel. If it's not open for you already, you can just click File, Open Chat. Today's webinar is eligible for CPE. So we can give you up to 2 CPE credits. In order to get 2, you need to stay on the entire session and also answer any polling questions when prompted. We will be recording this session and sending it out. So if there's anyone in your company you want to share it with, please feel free. So today we have Shay Simpson, who's going to be presenting, and she is with LBMC Technology Solutions and serves as our Sage Intacct consultant. She has 20 years of experience in accounting, and she's really glad to be here today with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Shay.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you guys for joining this afternoon and taking the time out of your day to go through the new release notes, as well as some best practices like Sarah indicated in regards to credit cards and charge payoffs. So there's a lot of exciting new functionality in regards to the R2 release for 2021. So as you know, the release calendar, this release came out on May 21st of this year. Our next release is going to be on August the 20th, and then the last one for fourth quarter will be on November the 12th. So this is a list of all of the impacts for the R2 release. So these are all the areas in which the R2 release affected within Sage Intacct. All right, so we're going to dive into accounts payable first and foremost. You are going to be able to cancel payment requests in bulk. This is something that has been requested within the community for a while now. You know that you've always been able to come in and cancel payment requests individually, but now we can do them in bulk. And this actually sends all of these bills back to the bill pay screen so they can be paid at a later time. Now, where we see a lot of functionality when this comes into play is that obviously a lot of times we have maybe some transactions within accounts payable. Maybe we have a new accounts payable team member in the group, and they accidentally come in and request payment for some bills that we don't necessarily want to pay at this time. So this, again, is just a really good way that we can actually cancel these payments in bulk. Also, continuing to look at accounts payable, we've got improved AP ledger report filtering. So now when you actually filter on a child location within an entity, it actually is going to now indicate the transactions that are and report on that child location, so not just on the parent. Also, for our external credits, the external credits now are going to appear in the appropriate period. Now, one thing to note that for the clients that are multi-entity, which most of you should be on a multi-entity shared environment, we just need to make sure that if you enter an AP credit in entity A and you do not want those credits applied to entity B, make sure that in the multi-entity configuration that this box is checked that limits our AP credits to the entity owners, okay? All right, we also have functionality for the customer drill down within the aging report. Now, obviously, this is not super, super useful because most of the time in an aging report, what are we drilling down to? We're drilling down to our actual transactions because that's what we're wanting to see. But if we do need to see some information on a customer, maybe perhaps some terms that were set up on that customer to ensure that those terms were correct, or maybe some other information pertaining to that customer, we could actually drill down into that customer record now. All right, in terms of accounts receivable for our, let's skip a slide. Let me go back. I felt like it skipped a slide. No, it didn't. My apologies. All right, so for now we have the functionality as far as for within our AR ledger, we are actually going to be able to drill down into advances. Now these two transactions that I have highlighted here are actually advances. And always before that, if you drill down into these transactions, you basically just got a summary. You didn't really get the details of those transactions themselves. Now, once you drill down into those, it is actually going to give you all of the details of those advances. So we're going to be able to see if there was any dimensions that were tagged in the transaction and all of the details surrounding those advances. The same type functionality that we saw with accounts payable. Again, we've got that improved AR ledger report filtering. So again, if we're filtering on our child location within those entities, we're going to be able to see those transactions that are applicable to the child, not to the parent. Also, for our external credits, again, those credits are going to appear in the appropriate period now. And again, same type functionality. If you enter an AR credit in entity A and you do not want those credits applied to entity B, make sure that we check that box. So again, we're seeing that same box down here at the very bottom in terms of checking those limit our AR credits to the entity owners. All right, so in regards to company, we now have more enhancements surrounding the checklist. Now, I don't know if any of the clients that are on the call have started using the functionality in regards to checklists, but there's really a lot of power behind these checklists, especially when it comes to month-end close, which is obviously the one that that's the request that we see the most, is I want a month-end checklist for my accounting team that I am going to be able to go through and ensure that everything has been completed for the month-end close. And I'm going to, it looks like, there we go. All right. So in regards to our checklist options, we are able to, we've actually got restrictions within the checklist themselves. So if we click on our checklist options, not only within the permissions of our users, but also within the checklist themselves, we can default who can actually update these checklists. Do we want just any user with permissions to be able to update the checklist? Do we only want it to be the checklist owners or the creators, or just the checklist owners? We can also set who default, or the ability to update for the assignments as well. So again, do we want any user with permissions to be able to update the assignments? Or is it just going to be the owners or users assigned to the assignments of a specific checklist, or only the checklist owners or users assigned to a specific assignment? So now not only within our user permissions do we have the flexibility to update our permissions, but even specifically more to these checklists themselves. Okay. So we also have assignment constraints. So again, this is looking at a checklist assignment for a month-end close process. Now, we have this assignment ID. This is our assignment for AP2, and we're saying that we want it to start on or after the due date of our AP1 assignment. Our AP1 is for an AR close. So notice that this assignment is for a bank recon. So we don't want the process for our bank reconciliation to begin until after the due date of our AR close. Now we can set this constraint type as either start on or after or finish by. So if we say that we don't want the bank reconciliation, we want it to be finished based upon the due date, or we can set other date type for AP close. So we have a lot of flexibility in there in terms of assignment constraints. Now, if we look at, again, that assignment for AP1, what is it telling us? Okay, we want AP1, again, here it says, we want accounts payable 2, or AP2 bank recon, to start after the due date of our AR close. So we do have a lot of flexibility there in terms to those assignments. So if you haven't looked at checklists yet, I encourage you to do so. Again, that can be extremely useful when it comes to month-end close. We can also import our checklist and our assignments. So now we have the availability to import these checklists and the assignments. You go into Company and Import. You will see this under the Company Setup Checklist. We do have that availability based on your permissions to be able to import the checklist and the assignment. All right, continuing to look at Company. We can also report on our checklist. So for example, we could create a report. We can actually assign this to a dashboard, and it would be for our month-end close. It's going to show me within my month-end close checklist my assignee name, what the assignment is, our assignment name, and the start date for that assignment, and then the due date. So again, if we were looking at our April month-end close, this might be a month-end checklist that we might create for that April month-end close. And it will actually give you the percentage of completion. So it can actually show you, based on the assignments themselves, how far we are in the process as far as completing this. So especially for like a bank reconciliation, we could actually come out here and look and see that it was 25% complete. So we would know, okay, the person that this is assigned to has started the bank reconciliation process, but they're not quite finished with it. All right, so we have a polling question that Sarah has for us in regards to closing our books. So I know a lot of you are very, very diligent about closing your books each month. But sometimes we're not always right on top of that. So we want to see, as far as our clients that are on the call today, how many of you close your books, and if so, how frequently? And Sarah's going to give us adequate time to complete this.
Yep, it is open. We've got a little over a minute left, but looks like most people have finished. We do have a question already, Shay, if you don't mind. Where do you see the checklist option on the company menu? Or if we want to wait and address that later, we can.
No, absolutely. I can actually go ahead and address that. So more than likely, you probably don't have permissions to the checklist. So you actually have to go in under your permissions, and under company, you will now see some new permissions available for checklist. And so those options, actually, you probably didn't see them until R1. So once you update your permissions, you should be able to see those options, those checklist options under company.
Right.
And I can actually go back. I can actually go back to that slide while we're waiting on this, and it is actually under company, setup, and then checklist. So once you update your permissions, you should be able to see that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Looks like most people are closing their books monthly. Great job, everyone.
Yes, that's what we want to see. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for that. We do have a new component on a dashboard that we can add. And the component, if you go into under a dashboard and add a component property, you are now going to be able to see this close through summary. And you can actually set this for the entity level. Now, what that is going to do is that is going to produce a report on your dashboard. You can come in and you can look at the various modules that you have within Sage Intacct. It is going to show us by legal entity the close through date. Now, obviously, in this test environment, our end user was not so diligent about closing their books each month. But this is a really good component to add to a dashboard. In fact, I had a client that just recently asked for this because, I mean, how many times does our accounting team, do we have turnover in our accounting team? And they want to know, we have a new accounting team coming in and they say, okay, I've inherited this financial system, and I know that the folks that were my predecessors, maybe they weren't as diligent as I am in closing the book. And so I want to know, based on my application, I want to know the last time that that application was closed. So this is just a really good, easy overview. Now, if you have drill down capabilities and you do have access to these various applications, you can actually go in. These are all going to be hyperlinks. You can actually go in and you can actually open and or close those periods at that time. So based on your permissions, you can actually go in and open and close those applications within this screen right here. All right, cash management. All right, so we now have this posting details tab. Now, I think this came out in R1, but we have more functionality in terms of now is applicable in terms of fund transfers, other receipts, bank and interest charges, and credit card charges and other fees. Now, what this is going to show us is this is actually going to show us our GL posting entry. So it's going to show us exactly what it's debiting and crediting. Also, if we have any intercompany entry, so if this is an intercompany transaction, it is also going to show me my due to and due from. So I don't actually have to go in and drill down into this. I can just click on my posting details within my fund transfer, and it's going to show me my entry right here. All right, continuing to look at cash management. All right, we've got some enhancements to bank feeds. Our bank feeds are now going to automatically refresh every 4 hours. If you are connected to the bank feeds, you don't have to do anything. This is going to be an automatic refresh every 4 hours. This is another new enhancement. We can now access our bank transactions from the actual checking and savings and credit card setup screens. Now, you do have to have permissions. So within cash management, we can actually be able to give our end users the flexibility to match within our banking transactions. So what is this going to look like? So I've also had clients that have requested, I want my AP folks to be able to come out here and I want them to be able to start matching transactions but I don't necessarily want them to have full access to the bank reconciliation, which makes sense. So in this case, they can actually come out here. So as long as they've got, again, got to make sure that they've got the permissions accordingly, they can come out to cash management, and within our checking accounts, they can actually come out to the bank transactions. Now, in this instance, they also have reconciliation permissions as well. But what is that going to look like? When they click on the bank transactions, they are now going to be able to start matching. So within Sage Intacct, they can match those bank transactions to our transactions within Intacct. So again, we must grant the permissions in order to set this up. So again, we have to make sure that for our cash management that we have set that up. Now, and also looking at our bank transaction rules. Now, if you have seen the notes that's on the cash management screen, that's been a pop-up for quite some time now. You know this has been coming. So we do have to set up the permissions for our bank transaction rules. So what are the rules? All right, so we have not only we have rules set, but we have rules themselves. So the rules themselves is what logically makes the match, okay? So we can set up our rules, and this is going to look a little bit different from what it looked like before. You probably know before that when you went into the reconciliation screen, in the bottom left-hand corner, you had matching attributes. And basically, the matching attributes look the same. It was still based on posting date, document number, and amount. But what this functionality is now doing is that when we set up these rules, again, we can set it up on the posting date and the amount, which has not changed. But now we can set it up not only on document number, but we can set it up on document number with leading zeros removed. So oftentimes we see in from the bank feed, we actually see that the bank brings over, instead of check 1, 2, 3, 4, it may have 3 preceding zeros before that check number. Well, what that's going to do is that is going to take our bank transaction, it's going to shave off those preceding zeros and then match it up to our document number within Sage Intacct. Also within the rules, you will see now that you have these 2 check boxes that group by document number and posting date. So how many times have we seen in Sage Intacct we may have multiple transactions, and it's a many-to-one relationship because we may only see one transaction post within our bank. What this is going to do now is within Sage Intacct, it's going to group the document numbers and or group the posting date. So now if we have 3 transactions that we can group by document number, that can easily be matched to the one transaction that has occurred on the banking side. So a lot of good functionality there. All right, we also have to set up, as I said before, rule sets. So the rule set houses the rule itself as well as assigns it to the account. So you may only have to generate one rule set because 9 times out of 10, within our matching rules for our accounts, we're pretty much always going to be matching on the same attributes. Again, posting date, document number, and amount. We'll then come in and assign our accounts to that set to where that set has been established. Now, like I said, you've probably seen this banner within Sage Intacct for quite some time now. So you know that this has been coming. Again, our rule is what logically makes the match. Our rule set is the container for those rules. Our rule sets allow you to specify the order and associate the bank accounts or credit cards to the account. And again, more than likely, we're probably going to put all of our checking accounts and all of our savings accounts within the same rule set. All right, so now we have another polling question.
Yep, so this polling question is, do you currently use journal entry approvals? So if you could just mark what your practice is with that. And then we'll have Shay continue.
Absolutely. Sarah, do we have any questions up until this point that I could maybe address?
No additional questions right now. Nope.
Good deal.
That means you're doing a great job being thorough.
The beauty of the R2 release is being that it came out at the end of May. Most of these items you probably have seen up until this point, because now, you know, especially for those rule sets and those rules, if you've tried to go in and do a bank reconciliation since the release of R2, you quickly saw that you got an error message and you had to correct that before you can move forward. So a lot of these things are not, you know, news.
Shay, we actually do have a question if we want to go ahead and address it while the poll is finishing
We've got
up.
some time here. Absolutely.
The question is, what is the purpose of associating a rule set to a credit card account?
All right, so you will see, this is kind of a preface to our next presentation that we'll be going over, is that you will actually see that if you have reconciliation set up for your credit cards, if you're doing the credit card feed, you have those credit card feeds, same as you have your banking feeds, you have to set up those matching attributes as well. And or if you are importing your credit card transactions. So same functionality. If you're importing transactions or if you have that credit card feed, you do have to set up those matching attributes, i.e. those rule sets.
Thanks, Shay. And our poll
Absolutely.
has wrapped up, so you can continue on. Thank you.
All right, what are our results here from our poll?
Yes, I'll go ahead and share that. We've got, let's see, 40% do not use journal entry approvals. We've got 13% for a few selected journal entry types, and then 10% for all journal entry types entered.
All right. All right, well, thank you guys for that. All right, so looking at our general ledger, we now have within, for those folks that are utilizing the journal entry approval, we can actually set up the email notification, the frequency. We can actually set that up within our GL setup. So before, you actually had to go out to preferences, up in the upper right-hand corner of Sage Intacct, you had to click on your name and you had to set up that cadence there. This is actually going to allow you to come in and you can either set it based on the approver, none, or the individual approvers. I'm going to walk you through what that represents. And those email notifications can either be daily, weekly, or monthly. For the weekly and monthly, they will come in at the end of the week and or at the end of the month. Now, this is something that was released in R1, but I do want to touch on it briefly here. Now within journal entry approvals, you can actually set up an approval group. Now you have to go out under your users and you have to set up a user group, but you can assign those user groups now to journal entry approvals. And again, this is a journal by journal type approval. So I can set an approval group, and when I come in and set up my notifications, because I have two end users, this Emma as well as this preview approver. I have two users within that group. I can also set up that email notification frequency for either or. So if I just want it to go to Emma, I can actually set up the emails to just go to Emma, but Emma and preview can both approve the journal entry. So that's a really good functionality. And that was something that I felt like it was good that they retouched on in R2. All right, so now within our journal entry approvals, so if I have gone in and submitted a journal entry and I am waiting on it to be approved, I can actually come out here and under my history, I can actually see who it's been submitted to. So basically I know who am I waiting on. It's been submitted and I'm waiting on this preview user to approve it. Now for the approvers, we do have added functionality that when they come out here to approve journal entries, they now have the actual attachments within this screen. So before they had to go into the details of the journal entry to be able to see the attachment. Now they can just click on the paperclip and actually see the attachment from the journal entry approval screen. All right, a little bit more functionality now in the GL outlier detection. I don't know if anyone is using that, but you do have to have journal entry approval set up in order to use the outlier detection. What that's going to do now is we now have added functionality in terms of our allocation. So if we have allocation set up within our journal entries, it's now going to look at that allocation split. And again, if there's anything that's raising a red flag, it's going to put that little exclamation point for us to click on there. So again, it's looking at that dollar amount that looks wonky, the location or department looks wonky, it is going to put in that within our allocation splits now. All right, so we also now can set up our user-defined book default. So we can go into our general ledger setup and we can actually set a default reporting book. Now, what that's great for is for contracts. So if anyone is using contracts, you know you have to set up a very specific user-defined book for contracts, as well as for dynamic allocations. Dynamic allocations go into a very specific user-defined book. Now, what that's going to do is it is going to default that user-defined book into our GL reports. It is not going to, however, default it into our financial reports. So within our financial reports, we still have to go out to the column settings and define if we want to layer on a user-defined book. Okay. All right, we have more functionality now in our dimension balances report. So within our dimension balances report, we now can have actual, budget, or actual and budget. So when we click on that content selection, it is now going to bring up an additional selection that we can say retain our year-to-date balances. And for our budget comparison, do we want to have budget then actual or actual then budget? What that is going to do is if we also select this difference column, obviously it's going to flip those signs whichever direction to show it as a positive variance and or a negative variance. Okay? So what that's going to look like is that in this instance, we have our budget and then our actual. And because our actual revenue was $2,000 more than our budget, is showing that as a positive difference. So again, how do we want that to look in terms of a positive and or a negative? All right, in regards to inventory, we can now allow negative inventory per warehouse. So within our warehouse information, we do have this box now to allow negative inventory for that particular warehouse. Now, where that is going to come into play is that if we have a drop ship warehouse, and oftentimes we have inventory that goes in and out of that warehouse, we may want to allow negative inventory for that specific warehouse. Okay. All right, now looking at order entry. So same type functionality we saw in cash management. We have this posting details. So now if we go into an order entry transaction, two things you're going to now see. You're going to see the posting details tab. Again, it's going to give us the impact on that general ledger and what that entry is going to look like. Another good function here is that now it always displays our transaction. And that was something that was always such a pain, is that if I was in something, am I in a sales order? Am I in a sales invoice? Am I in a credit memo? What am I looking at? So now it is always going to display our transaction here at the top. No matter what tab I click in, I'm always going to be able to see what transaction I'm working with. All right, now looking at projects. We now have the flexibility of having billable, marking credit card transactions as billable if we are using projects. Now, what that's going to do is for our credit card transactions, if we mark those as billable, we can now generate invoices on those transactions. So again, we just have to make sure that we configure that. So within configuring our projects, we will need to make sure that we include all of the transactions that we want those credit card transactions to flow over to. And then when we generate our invoices, on the display options, we do have to make sure that that box is checked for credit card transactions so that we are able to bring over those credit card transactions when generating our invoices. So now when we go into the generate invoice screen, we are now going to see down here at the bottom if we have any credit card transactions that are going to be applied for that particular project. All right, in looking at purchasing. Sorry, projects. I'm looking at one thing and thinking another. Okay, so also whenever we import our transactions, we do have this column now for billable as well. All right, now going into purchasing. All right, the same thing in purchasing that we saw before in order entry is that we always are going to see our transaction type up here. We are also going to see that posting detail screen. So again, our general ledger transaction is always going to be on that posting detail screen. So we can see the impact of the general ledger. Again, whether I'm on the transaction, posting detail history, or payment details tab, I'm always going to know what transaction I am working in within purchasing. All right, now for three-way match, and this is an early adoption of this. So three-way match is the match between our purchase order, our receipt, and our invoice. Now we do have to set up tolerances, so we can set those tolerances for quantity and or price. We will need a GL account for those variances, and we also have to act on those exceptions. Now we can set it to where, say, if we have a 2% tolerance for a price variance, anything below that, where it's going to clear. Anything above that 2%, we are going to have to act on those exceptions, okay? Now, a couple of things. Back orders are not supported at this time, okay? Security is also not supported at this time. So if you have the user permissions in purchasing to be able to view and enter transactions, you're going to be able to do the three-way match. Currency conversions are also currently not considered. So I know that's on the roadmap for Intacct, that if we do have a price variance, due to a currency conversion. Right now, again, that's not supported. So if you want to be in the early adopter program, you will actually see a banner out within Sage Intacct, and you can just contact your Sage Intacct account manager to be a part of that early adopter program. All right, financial reporting. So this is a good one. So before, we would always see in our columns, if we had a budget column, that we could actually have an actual to budget difference. But now we have a budget to actual difference. So the same type functionality that we saw on a few slides back, they've added this to where we can flip-flop the way that it subtracts. All right, also in financial reporting, you're going to notice a difference. So down here now in our rounding, it used to say in whole dollars. Now it says in whole numbers because we are going international and we have more multi-currencies. So it's actually going to say in whole numbers. All right. How many folks were always frustrated when you went out here to run a custom report from the custom report screen, and this is what you got? You got this report type that you could either select HTML, CSV, I think, or PDF, and you could click OK. You could not see your prompts or filters. Well, now you can. So when you run a custom report from that custom report list, you are now going to see your prompts and your filters. So just as if you were going into a particular module and running a custom report from that module itself, now you're going to see those same prompts and filters. So this is a big one for me. So again, it is going to show any of the filters that we have created whenever we have built the custom report. It is going to show those filters now on the custom report itself. Also, whenever we run the report, it is now going to show if we have created a filter. So for example, we were filtering our vendor ID on 20007. When we run that custom report, it is now going to show us this AP history report is filtered on vendor 20007. Again, this is huge because so many times as a consultant, I would create a custom report for a client, and the client would come back to me and say, why can't I see information XYZ? And I would have to go back and say, well, this report was filtered on whatever dimension, whatever application, whatever field that we wanted to filter the report on to carve out the data. So now it's actually going to show us what that has been filtered on. All right, and I think we have one more question for this slide deck, and this is going to be the last one before we dive into credit cards.
Yep, so I have opened the polling question, and this question is asking if you use the Learning Center to gain a better understanding of functionality in Sage Intacct. And that Learning Center will give you access to all kinds of different Intacct learning courses.
Yeah.
It looks like quite a bit of you are already using the Learning Center, which is great.
Perfect.
We've got
That's
61% so far.
Good deal. And I don't know if most of you folks know, so in looking at our last slide deck here of the day, as we're wrapping up this polling question, is that now we are able to connect to our Learning Center within Sage Intacct. So we now have this single sign-on. So you don't have to you don't have to log in separate now to the Learning Center. You can actually go up within Sage Intacct, and if we go up to help on this page, you will now see down below, right below help on this page, but you will actually see the Learning Center. And I don't know if many of you are aware or not, but a lot of these courses within the Learning Center are free. So there are a lot of those are self-guided courses that you're able to go into, and you can go in and take them for free. And sometimes they're like 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, but at least it gives you the flexibility. You can go in, you can start to watch them. If something comes up, you can pause it, go back to it. It makes it really, really nice. All
That's
right.
great that that's so easy to get to now.
Absolutely.
And our poll has wrapped, so you can continue, Shay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So again, 2 clicks, no separate login. If you are an existing user within the learning community, you don't have to do anything. Again, you can get to that from Sage Intacct. If you are a new user, you will have to request access to that Learning Center. So again, this will walk you through those steps in order to get access to the Learning Center. All right, guys, so that wraps up our R2 2021 release note. Now, again, that's just a high-level overview. That's not everything that was necessarily released in R2. I do encourage you that if you want to see all of the release notes, you can actually go out to Sage Intacct, and this is the URL for that. You can actually go out and look at all of the release notes. All right, Sarah, do we have any other questions in regards to the release?
No other questions at this time, but certainly everyone, if something comes up later on, please go ahead and submit your question in either the chat or the Q&A panel.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and switch out my PowerPoint presentations here. All right, Sarah, are you able to see that secondary PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. All right. All right, so this has been, I have gotten multiple questions from various clients in regards to the charge card payoff process and what that looks like. So we're going to dive into this today. Our agenda is we're going to go through our learning objectives. We're going to be able to establish credit card usage and set up. We're going to walk through that charge card payoff process. We're going to look at the credit card feed and reconciliations, as well as troubleshooting credit card issues. Our learning objective today is we're going to understand the basic concepts of charge cards. We're going to look at the GL impact versus the AP journal and AP aging when using cash management. And this is a big one. If you understand the GL impact and what is affecting the general ledger as well as the AP subledger, this is going to help you guys going forward to help with those issues that arise, and you'll be able to troubleshoot those issues on your own. We're also going to understand that charge card payoff process and be able to successfully complete a credit card reconciliation. All right, so one thing in looking at credit cards that you want to kind of go through and ask yourself, how do you pay your charge card? Is it by check or ACH, by bank transfer? Are we paying them in full? Are we paying them in installments? What kind of detail do you want to keep in your records on your charge usage? Is it just expense to the GL, or is it every expense tied to a vendor record and then paid by the charge card? Do you pay any regular AP bills by charge card? If so, are these charges on an account with a vendor and automatically charged? Only paid after the receipt of the bill, notification sent to vendor to use the charge card? Are these bills sometimes paid by charge card and sometimes paid by check? And what's the hierarchy of use of credit cards? And this is a big one. So do we have one corporate account that basically each month we get one corporate statement and then we pay that one statement, but yet it has the individual transactions for each individual's employee charge card that they may hold? Do we have one account with subcards, but we pay those individual subcards, okay? Or do we have a one-to-one relationship between account and card? So these are some really good questions to ask yourself when setting up charge cards. And that's going to define how we establish those charge cards within Sage Intacct. All right, where and how are those charges coded to the GL? Do the receipts pass through during the month and recorded? Do we need to use another software package or bank utility to code those? Or do we wait until the statement comes and then we code our transaction? So any consideration where charge cards will be able to be billable to customers or projects, that's something we want to look at as well. All right, so just some fundamental concepts in looking at charge cards. Now, you know that when you set up a charge card, you have to assign it to a GL account. So it is a one-to-one relationship with a GL account. Now, that is something that's very important to remember and to consider. So again, when looking back at those questions, do we receive one overseeing corporate charge card, one statement, and that's how we pay it? Because if so, we can set up one charge card within Intacct. We do not have to set up 16 charge cards for 16 employees. Now, that's if we pay it with one overseeing corporate card, or what they like to call like that ghost card, that ghost account. Or do we pay those individual 16 cards individually? Again, we would have to have a one-to-one relationship. So we would have to set up 16 credit cards with 16 GL accounts. So something to kind of think about. You also have to assign a vendor ID to these charge cards as well. Because again, as we look at this charge card payoff, it's going to be creating those payables due to American Express, Visa, MasterCard, etc. Okay. All right. So let's start looking at the basics. Okay. So when a charge card transaction is entered, what is happening in Intacct? Okay. It's going to debit the expense account and it's going to credit a credit card liability account. Okay. So we see these transactions. We have two debits to our two expense accounts, which totals $1,025.69 that is sitting in a payables account. Now, note, credit card transactions can be imported or they can feed from an external integration, i.e. Expensify. Okay. However, expense transactions placed on a credit card do not feed over to cash management. And let me explain that. If you have set up within Sage Intacct time and expense, okay, and you are truly submitting your expense reports in time and expense, and you go in and you say, okay, for this expense report, I am creating an expense that has been placed on a credit card. However, it is not reimbursable to the employee, and I am paying that with that credit card. Those transactions do not feed over to cash management. So if you look at that in time and expense, and you look at the methods of payment, those credit cards that are set up as methods of payment are not tied to any credit card that sits within cash management. Okay, so that's something good to kind of note. All right, when a charge card transaction is entered, again, what is that doing? It is increasing the balance due on the vendor record, but no vendor bill has been created at this point. Okay, so if we go in and look at our AP ledger, we see that we have that $1,025.69 charge to American Express, but again, no vendor bill has been created at this point. All right, when we pay an AP bill via a credit card, again, we need to go in. A lot of times we will set up on our vendors, we will set up the preferred method of payment as credit card. When that AP bill is paid, it's going to debit accounts payable and credit the credit card liability account again. Okay, so again, it has put a debit for $2,500 for this transaction because we have paid this Amazon bill with our credit card of Amex. So it has debited accounts payable and again, credited that credit card liability account. Okay. Again, this increases the amount due on the vendor record, but again, no vendor bill has been created at this point. All right, and we are getting ready to dive into the charge card payoff, and we have another polling question.
Yep, so this question is live. Do you currently utilize charge payoffs?
So for this one, Sarah, I'm very curious to see the results of this because, like I said, this has been a question that's come up from multiple clients, and oftentimes it's the understanding the process of what works. So I will be very curious to see how many of our clients on the call are currently using charge payoff.
So far, we are split in the middle. Half exactly half do and exactly half don't.
Well, this will be a great discussion then.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are using it, you may say, okay, this is all just everything that I already knew about charge payoffs, and you're just reiterating everything that I knew. And for those of you not using it, then you're going to be like, oh man, I didn't know it did that. So I'm hoping this is going to help you guys out and simplify this process for you.
Yes. Okay, yeah, it looks like we've got 33%. We've got 9 people that said they do use charge payoffs, and then 37% do not use charge payoffs. So,
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's dive into this. Okay, so each month, the process should be to go into charge payoff within cash management and select the transactions to be cleared by the statement. Now, what this is going to do, it's going to remove the transactions from cash management module under those credit card transactions. So those credit card transactions that we just looked at, that's what this is going to do. It's going to remove those from the credit card transactions. All right, so what's this doing from a general ledger perspective? It is debiting that credit card payoff or that credit card liability account. Excuse me, it is debiting. I'll get it straight here in a minute. It is debiting the credit card liability account, and it is crediting accounts payable. Okay? Now our AP bill is created. Okay? But what do we see? Our vendor record did not increase. Okay? When those credit card transactions went in, remember, it showed us that we had X number of dollars due to American Express, but we didn't see an AP bill. When we go in and actually do that charge card payoff process, that's when the AP bill is created. Okay? So now let's look at the big picture. And I am old school, and I like to pull out T accounts because to me, I want to see visually what is this doing in Sage Intacct. Okay? So those credit card transactions are entered. Again, it debits our expense, and it credits our credit card payable. And that's when it increases how much is due on the vendor record. So it's showing I owe $1,025.69 to American Express, okay? When we pay our AP bills via credit card, it is debiting accounts payable and crediting that credit card payable. Again, increasing the amount due on the vendor record to American Express. All right, each month when we go in and we do that charge card payoff, excuse me, now what is it going to do? It's going to debit the credit card payable. So we'll see, it's going to clear out those transactions of my $25,000, my $1,025.69. It's going to credit accounts payable. Again, what did we say before? It created the vendor bill, but there was no impact on the vendor record, okay? Because up here is where it's telling us we owe this much to American Express. We're not going to say we're not going to double it, all right? Now, when the American Express bill is paid, again, we are going to debit accounts payable, credit cash. That is when it is going to clear that off of our vendor record for American Express. So that is the monthly process that we are going through. So I am going to pause for a moment because are there any questions that have come up thus far?
There is a question. The question is there a way to make all the Amex cards actually point to just one American Express vendor? Or does it have to create a new vendor for each card?
No, you should be able to set it up. The GL account has to be a one-to-one relationship. I'm going to test that for sure. I'm 99.999% sure. I don't think you have to set up a separate vendor record, but I will verify that. Let me verify that 100%.
Sounds good. Thank you. That's the only question we have right now.
Okay. All right. All right. So in looking at our vendor aging report, we can exclude credit card transactions from the vendor aging report, which is great. This came out, I want to say maybe it was in R4 of 2020. Because those credit card transactions, again, they're going to a separate GL account. They're going to a credit card liability account. Okay, so if we exclude the credit card transactions and we run our vendor aging, technically our vendor aging should be tying to our AP trade account in the GL. it should be a one-to-one relationship because we're not looking at any other AP account. We're just looking at the one. So that's something good to notate. All right. Again, we've got another polling question coming up.
Hey, this question is, do you currently use credit card feeds to reconcile your credit cards?
And this is what we kind of, someone had asked the question when we were going through our R2 2021 release notes. Someone had asked the question about, in reference to the rule sets and the rules and why we needed to establish those for credit cards. So this is going to kind of walk us through the why. So as we start looking at these credit card feeds and the reconciliations, we're going to see that being able to be applied to the credit cards for us. So how are we looking, Sarah? Are we still at another 50-50 split?
No, this one actually,
60-40.
Less than that. We've got 62 to 15% that they are not using credit card feeds to reconcile credit cards. So a majority are not using them right now, but they might start after this next section.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, just a few more seconds here. Yeah, it looks like most people are not using them right now. So Shay will go ahead and explain credit card feeds.
All right. Okay, so in order to use the credit card feeds, you do have to subscribe to the Sage Cloud Services. So that's under Company Admin Subscriptions, and you'll go to Sage Cloud Services. You'll click Subscribe. Now, obviously, it's always going to pop up with this box, but you will not be charged for these services. This is included with your Intacct subscription. Once you subscribe, you're going to enable those bank feeds. And then we are going to connect to the banking cloud for those credit cards. So we're going to go into Cash Management, under Setup, Credit Card, and then we're going to click on the tab for Banking Cloud. And we're going to go through the wizard and we're going to enter in our credit card credentials. So what that is going to do is that is going to connect that credit card feed just like we do for our bank feeds. Okay. And most of the larger credit cards are going to be out there. And again, they're constantly adding new ones. So again, same thing that we just looked at in our R2 2021 release. We are going to have to set up those rule sets as well as those rules in order for us to be able to create those matching attributes. Okay? So again, if credit cards are housed at the entity level, the rule set will need to be created at the entity level as well. If your credit cards are housed at the top level, you'll be able to create this rule set at the top level. Okay? Again, the rule set houses the rules and the accounts associated with those rules. So again, we're applying our matching attributes for our document number, posting date, and amount and assigning that rule to our rule set. Okay? All right. So in terms of our credit card reconciliation, you're going to go under Cash Management, under All, and go into Reconciliation. You're going to see the link for the credit card reconciliations. Again, whether these are housed at the top level or at the entity level will depend on where you go in for your reconciliation. Again, if they're at the entity level, you'll reconcile at the entity level. Top level, you'll reconcile at the top level. Once you go into the reconciliation, you're going to select your account. So this is going to look very, very similar to the way that you reconcile for your checking account. You're going to put in that beginning cutoff date, the statement ending date, as well as the statement ending balance. Then once we go in, we are going to see, and it's not showing on this one because obviously I was not able to connect to a live environment of an Amex credit card feed, so I'm only seeing the Intacct transactions. But if I were connected to the Amex credit card feed, I would see a separate tab next to Intacct that would indicate, it would say bank. So if you're familiar with the bank feeds and what they look like, it's the exact same functionality when we're looking at credit cards. The same functionality that we see in our bank reconciliation. So we are able to come in. We have set up those matching attributes. So as Intacct looks behind the scenes at our transaction date, our document numbers, and our payees and amounts, excuse me, not payees and amounts, it is going to go in and start matching those transactions for us behind the scenes. So in essence, by the time we get to month-end close, we should have very few transactions that have not matched automatically. Now, sometimes you're going to see, I had a client just recently ask me, okay, what if I have a credit card company that they automatically, this was for, I think this was more in regards to AR, but they basically had a fee that they charged. Of course, it's that typical credit card fee. And what they were seeing on the credit card side was basically the net amount that was being posted. Okay, obviously in Intacct, more than likely you're going to see some sort of AR customer invoice that you're going to be receiving payment against, and then you're probably going to be loading those credit card fees as a journal entry, for instance. So on the Intacct side, we're seeing the amount that we're receiving for our customers in total, then we're also seeing that credit card fee, but on the credit card side, we're just seeing the net difference, or the net amount, excuse me. So in that instance, oftentimes, you know, when we went in and we set up our matching attributes, we were trying to group it by document date and document number. Well, sometimes those fees don't necessarily come through at the exact same time as the transaction themselves. So again, it may require some manual matching, but for the most part, Intacct should be matching up these transactions for us as a one-to-one relationship. Again, on this particular side, again, you're only seeing transactions that have come through via either an expense or payables. In this example, I did not show any, I didn't show any examples of anything that was flowing through AR. But again, exact same concept that we saw before in terms of, again, we are going to see same thing for, like we do on our bank recs. We always have the state of matched or unmatched. And for transaction type, we see charges as well as deposits. All right. So I think we have our last polling question of the day.
Yep, I'll go ahead and get that started. So the last question is, do you experience issues with credit card transactions and reconciling your credit cards? And we also do have a couple of questions that we could address while these are being completed.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So the first question is it possible to enable and test this in a sandbox, or should it only be done in a live environment?
No, you can do it in Sandbox. So you can because again, you're not being charged for those services. So absolutely, and that's what I would advise. Go ahead and connect to your credit card feed within your Sandbox environment, if you do have a Sandbox environment. And then once you connect to that feed, you should be able to see those transactions come across. And you can also walk through that charge card payoff. You can actually see those, what it is going to do on the AP side as well as on the GL side. So absolutely, I would highly recommend using a Sandbox.
Right. And then the second question is, if using a credit card feed, can you create an entry from a missed transaction?
Yes, you can. So if we go back to the same functionality that we actually saw in the banking transactions as well. And so if you have utilized the bank feed and the bank reconciliation, when you look at the banking side, I can actually, I won't be able to show you this in a test environment because Intacct has not provided us a dummy Amex or Visa or MasterCard account to attach to. So on the banking side, so if I had another tab here and I had my banking transactions, you would see those more actions. And from those more actions, I think they are, I know it's journal entry, I think apply payment and record payment. I think maybe the one, I forget exactly what the actions are, but yes, you can go ahead and record those straight from the credit card feed. Great question.
Okay. And then the last question we have right now is, are there any plans to expand the card feeds and bank feeds with more commercial solutions like Amex at Work or commercial banking services with the big
Yes, yes. They're always adding new banks and more functionality. Again, I mean, we don't necessarily get updates in terms of new banks or new credit card institutions that they have added. I just encourage you to maybe quarterly go out there and look at the banking cloud solutions and see what is available. It's what I would recommend.
Great, thank you. And looking at our polling results, it looks like 55% of everybody attending today has issues on occasion. And then we've got a 23% that are running on a well-oiled machine, which is great. And then we've got 9% have too many issues. So please, please reach out to us and let Shay and the rest of the team help. So
yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right, guys. So as we wrap up our presentation for the day, we want to go in and we are actually going to start looking at some troubleshooting credit card issues. So we're actually going to look at 2 use cases today, okay? And these are actual client use-based cases that I have seen and worked through with a couple of clients of mine. So, all right, so let's look at our first use case. All right, so what's our criteria? So our client uses Expensify for employee expense reports, okay? Those expense reports contain transactions that have been placed on corporate purchasing cards. and therefore they are not reimbursable to the employee. Okay, these transactions feed into Sage Intacct via an integration. So remember that I said before that if you are utilizing time and expense, those expenses do not feed over to cash management. But obviously, we are looking at an integration with Expensify. So these expenses feed over into cash management, into our credit card transactions, okay? Here is the issue. This particular client has not been clearing credit card transactions via a charge payoff, okay? But what they have been doing is they've been creating an AP bill each month to pay an American Express card. The client needs to remove transactions from cash management in order to process correctly going forward, okay? So let's kind of look at this behind the scenes. So again, what were we seeing happen? When we looked at the transactions, and these transactions actually went back to 2017, and we were seeing, okay, back in 2017, what happened? The charges were coming over from Expensify, they were debiting the expense, and they were crediting the credit card payable. And it was putting that information out there and increasing our balance on our vendor record each month, okay? Or for each transaction, not even necessarily each month, for each transaction period, okay? Each month, the client was going in and creating an AP bill, a separate AP bill. So in other words, they were just truly going into accounts payable and adding a new bill for American Express. Okay, what was that doing? It was crediting the credit card payable, or excuse me, debiting the credit card payable and crediting AP, okay? So what was the client seeing? All right, my GL account for my credit card payable, look, it was clearing out each month. We're doing good. Our GL is looking okay. All right, and we're putting that balance on the vendor record. Okay, did it double it here? Yep, at that point it did. But when they went in and they paid that AP bill, so they created that American Express bill, and they paid it, it of course debited accounts payable to their receipt, cleared it out, credited cash, and look, it came off the vendor record. Said, still got this measly $5,000 sitting up here. Okay. So the client came to me and they said, you know, Shay, we're looking at this. We see all these credit card transactions sitting out here in cash management. We don't know what that means. We also see that it's saying we still owe $5,000 to American Express, but we don't owe $5,000 to American Express because we've paid them. We created our monthly bill and we paid them. So that's when we kind of started diving into this, and we're like, okay, obviously we've got to clean this up because this goes back to 2017. So how do we need to do this and get it off of the vendor record without necessarily doing anything to impact our GL? Because right now our GL is perfect. Again, we're clearing out that liability credit card account each month. So again, what's that also telling me? Well, my ledger does not tie to my subledger. So, you know, when you're running a vendor aging report and you're trying to tie out your subledger to your GL, it's like, oh, red flags everywhere. Auditors are coming down us. All right. So we came up with a resolution. And obviously we tested this in a sandbox environment first and foremost, because again, we're going back to 2017 to clear out all of these transactions. Do I want to impact my general ledger and my financials in 2021? No. because my auditors are going to come down on me hard. So what do I need to do? All right. So first of all, I need to get those out of the credit card transactions in cash management. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do one massive charge payoff. And when I say they had credit card transactions sitting in cash management, they had thousands of transactions sitting in cash management. You may be saying, wow, me too. So you're going to, what is that going to do again when we do that charge payoff? It's going to debit the credit card payable, and it is going to credit accounts payable. Now remember, looking back at our transactions, did that have any impact on our vendor record? Nope. But at that point, it created another AP bill. But you're like, Shay, we don't owe American Express. Why am I creating another AP bill if I don't owe American Express? Also, Shay, my ledger was in balance. Why am I screwing with my general ledger at this point in time? Okay. Well, we had to import a negative AP bill, and we had to load it as historical. Now, if you remember back to your days of implementation and when you were loading in all of your history, what did you have to do, or what did LBMC do for you? We loaded AP bills into the subledger that did not affect the general ledger for us to be able to pay off of. So we're leveraging off of that exact same comment. Now, why did I load it as a negative AP bill and not a credit memo? Well, up until the R4 2020 release, you couldn't load credit adjustments or debit adjustments as historical. You can do that now. So you do have the flexibility. Would you have to do it as an AP bill, as a negative AP bill? No. You could load it as a credit memo and still load it as historical. So as I just stated, when you load something as historical, it has no impact on the general ledger, but it is impacting the subledger. So what that does is that goes out there and it creates a negative bill, but again, it's going to take that $5,000 balance off of my American Express. Okay? At this point too, my vendor bill is created. Now, I need to marry the bill against the negative historical bill, okay? And when I say marry, what that means is I need to go in and I need to, in essence, pay it. So if I go into my pay bill screen, I have an AP bill out there that was created when I did my charge payoff. And I am going to marry it against that negative AP bill that I just entered. Again, that's going to get it off of my vendor record. And because the impact is zero, because I've got a positive bill and a negative bill, the net impact is zero. There's no effect to the general ledger. Now, what that did, we look back, when I did that charge payoff in 2021, I had a debit to credit card payable and a credit to accounts payable. I've got to get that off of my general ledger. So I had to do an adjusting journal entry. I had to go in. Obviously, this client had on their GL accounts, they had the box checked for not allowing direct posting to accounts payable. So we had to uncheck that box. And then we had to go in and do a manual journal entry that credited AP credited the credit card payable and debited accounts payable. So that cleared that off of when we created that charge payoff. So what did this do in our resolution? It completely cleared out their vendor record. So now if they went into their vendor record, it truly shows what they owe to American Express going forward. It also cleared out all of those old credit card transactions. So now if they go into credit card transactions, they truly see the credit card transactions that are applicable to 2021. And they're able to go through that charge card payoff on a monthly basis seamlessly. So was this an overnight resolution? Absolutely not. This took a lot of digging into. It took a lot of testing in the sandbox to make sure that, again, biggest thing that was coming down from upper management was we don't want an impact to the GL for 2021. Obviously, we don't have to want to go back and restate financials in years that we've closed. So I had to ensure them that it was not going to have an impact on their financials in 2021, but was truly getting the information out of the subledger so that going forward, they had a process that they could rely on. So again, if any of you are running into this issue with credit cards, if you go out there right now and you look at your vendor record for any of your credit cards, whether it be American Express, Visa, MasterCard, or another banking institution, and you see on that vendor record that you owe more than what you actually owe them, that's going to be a red flag. And we can definitely help you walk through any type of cleanup. And it's extremely beneficial because now the client also has the reassurance that when they run their vendor aging report, that they truly tie to the general ledger, because the main thorn in their side that was causing their aging to not tie to their GL was mainly due to this, to these credit card transactions. So that's one case scenario. So if we look at our second case scenario, again, this is for a client that came up here recently. So in this case, for our criteria, our client pays their AP bills via an American Express card, okay? They have this vendor invoice sitting out here, label, it's vendor invoice March 1234 for vendor ID 702. It's been entered in AP for $7,270, okay? So they've entered in this bill for this particular vendor, this particular invoice, $7,270. However, when we went in and looked at it, invoice March 1234 was marked as fully paid, okay? So it's showing that I don't owe anything to vendor 702. Up to this point, they were using charge payoff. All their Amex statements to date had corresponding charge payoffs each month created and reconciled. So just like we walked through before, the charge payoff process. Each month, that's exactly what they were doing, okay? The issue was that when they looked at their credit card transactions and cash management, they still had a transaction sitting out there that was related to this vendor, 702, for invoice March 1234 in the amount of $200. And so, again, we had to walk through the why. Okay, it's marked as fully paid. We don't owe anything to this vendor. Why do we have these credit card transactions sitting out here in the amount of $200, and yet all of our statements have been reconciled? So we had to kind of start digging through this to see what was causing this. Now, if you looked at a prior charge payoff, I noticed that on the charge payoff, here's my transaction, that the original bill was $7,270. The credit card transaction that was ran and processed was only for $7,070. So there was another $200, which if it's sitting in credit card transactions, in essence, that meant there was another credit card transaction processed for $200. Okay? But again, let's look at the T account. So when that AP bill was entered, it debited the expense for $7,270 and credited accounts payable. And it put, this was the amount due to vendor 702. Then when they paid the bill, they paid it in 2 different transactions. So they ran the credit card first for $7,070, loaded in a credit card transaction so it debited accounts payable, credited that credit card payable, and then again for the 200, okay? So what did that do? Took it off the vendor record, so we don't owe the vendor anymore, and put it onto American Express. So now we owe American Express $7,270. All right, so they were doing their process of charge card payoff, doing it great. So they went in and they did their charge payoff, but they only did it for $7,070. So what did that do? It debited credit card payable and credited AP for $7,070. Again, no impact to the subledger. Then when that Amex bill was paid, again, debited accounts payable, credited cash. So notice here, again, still got $200 that apparently we owe to American Express. So when I looked at the resolution, again, what was all of this telling me? Supposedly they ran a second credit card transaction for $200. Okay? Again, however, all the Amex statements to date had corresponding charge payoffs and had been reconciled. More than likely, and this is exactly what happened, was the client entered in a credit card transaction for $200. However, it was never processed. Okay, so we couldn't necessarily determine from our conversations if maybe they supplied to vendor 702 and maybe told them to run that secondary transaction for $200, and maybe vendor 702 didn't run the card, or the transaction could have failed. Again, without, of course, digging deeper into it, we didn't look at necessarily why that particular portion of it occurred. We just knew that someone had entered in those credit card transactions for $200, but again, it was never processed through American Express. So in essence, the client still owed vendor 702 $200. So my recommendation was go ahead and delete that credit card transaction. Get it out of your system. Go ahead and run the credit card for the $200. Once you can ensure that it is ran, you'll enter back in that credit card transaction with whatever date you run the card for. So if it's today's date, it's going to run it through for 6/10. Then what we should be seeing is that when we get our June statement, I should see a credit card transaction on 6/10 for $200. Again, I'll be able to go through my charge card payoff, and I'll be able to reconcile my American Express. And again, I'm not going to, it's not going to show anything owed to American Express or sitting in that credit card liability. Because that was another thing I was able to confirm, was that when I went out here and I actually looked at their credit card payable account, notice here that when that charge payoff, when that one was done, I still saw that they had $200 sitting in credit card payable. I also saw that they still had $200 within the subledger that was supposedly due to American Express. So I know that is a lot. Again, I'm hoping that maybe some of these use cases can be applicable to you guys. Obviously, Sarah will not only share the presentation, we also have the slide deck. If you want to go back and look at some of those slides that actually shows the T accounts and shows the ins and outs of what happens in the general ledger and what happens in the subledger, maybe that can help you guys going forward in terms of that reconciliation process. So any questions, Sarah, that have popped up in the last little bit?
No, we actually don't have any other questions, but thank you for posting your information here. If you have any questions, please reach out to info@lbmctech.com. We'll direct you to the right person and make sure that you're well taken care of. Did you have anything else, Shay?
I don't think so. Thank you guys for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Shay. And thanks everyone for attending. We will send out the recording and also your CPE. But if there's anything else we can help you with, please let us know. And everyone enjoy the rest of your day.